Hello everyone, what is going on? My name is Timpedia, and welcome to the first episode of my new Magic the Gathering series called Commend Me. I put out a tweet recently, a few days ago. This is being recorded, obviously, as you can see, on, what's it called? March 23rd, 2018. And, currently in Magic the Gathering, we just had leaks for the Magic set Dominaria. And I tweeted out during the leaks that I really wanted to do a series where I at least talk about my commander decks. I mention Magic all the time on the TNT podcast. I've done years of Magic series over the course of this channel. I did 3 seasons, as they got shorter, of Magic content using Duels of the Planeswalkers, then Cockatrice, and now nothing. And unfortunately, I just don't have the time or resources to play Magic online very much, and there's no way in hell I'm investing the time in doing paper Magic recording of Commander. I just go to my store one day a week and play for funsies, and I don't want to be the guy who sets up a whole camera rig and everyone wants to be on camera and all that shit. I'd rather just do this. If you want to see that kind of thing, Game Nights is a very heavily produced show by the Command Zone. MTG Mudsta, I watch him. Every time he puts out a video, he does awesome videos, and his games and he's what I would do if I could have all the resources and time. But obviously YouTube's not a huge thing for me anymore. It's certainly not to that editing level, which is incredible that he does. The people at MTG Goldfish do Commander online, and one of my favorite one is Star City Games does Commander Versus. They just would finish their 10th season, and that show is awesome. So if you want to see Commander, I recommend those sources. Like I said, I would love to put out Commander videos. If I can, I might at some point. Like if I get Friedman from the podcast and maybe someone else online, but that's unlikely. But anyway, back to my tweet. I said in my tweet, I want to talk about Sorry, I'm going to go on a tangent again. I promise it's related. There's another channel called The Lab Maniacs, who do competitive Commander videos, and those are awesome for a whole different reason, because competitive is such a different thing from regular Commander. But they also did a thing of set reviews, where they would talk about cards that would apply to Commander as a whole, or competitive Commander as a whole. And I wanted to do something like that, but I wanted to make it more personal. So, I wanted to start talking about how I will be changing my personal Commander decks, and my thought process behind it when every new set comes out. That being said, I've never done a video actually saying what my Commander decks are. I've kind of mentioned some of them in the podcast, but I wanted to do a video or two where I introduce you guys to my personal Commander decks. Also partially because I'm at the point where money is getting tighter because I'm having to do more adult things. Like my girlfriend and I want to move out of the apartment we're living in now into a slightly more expensive rent-a-house, which is more money, less money to put into Magic. I'm also going through a thing where I want to sell a lot of my cards. I just have so many cards that are cool, but I know I'm never going to use them because I don't play formats that they're related to and things like that. So I'm about to dump, honestly, at least $1,000 worth of cards. I'm trying to organize it all and bring it to a big store in about a half hour from me that'll just buy it all. So, anyway, I wanted to take this time and go over, depending on how long this video takes, at least my first 4. I currently have 8 Commander decks, a few which I recently took apart, not that I'll talk about here. I have, since you guys can see my screen, this case, which is awesome. I bought it at least a year ago. It's from Cockapoo TGT, which is the silliest name ever. I don't think I spent quite this much on it, but this case is awesome. I currently have 8. Oh, I can't look it up. I don't want to. Well, let's go to. I'm trying not to have lots of personal information or anything on the screen. Ultimate Guard Commander deck box. Where are you, Ultimate Guard? These. Aha! The boulders. I have 8 of these. As you can see, for 100 card decks, there are 8 colors exactly. So when I saw this, I decided, hey, 8 of them fit in this, as well as a box for tokens and a dice bag, where I can have my Commander spin down counter and dice for playing Magic and for D&D, and it fits perfectly. So I am trying to keep myself at 8 commander decks, which means I probably won't build a new deck completely from the ground up without putting a deck on hold or being willing to take it apart, or at least just like kind of set it aside as a side deck. Because I used to have about 10 or more decks that I would trade some out, but I found I just didn't use some. So I'm trying to concentrate myself to decks I'm always interested in playing. Anyway, so the 8 commander decks I have right now, I'm going to take you on a journey through 4 of them at least in alphabetical order based on the first letter of the commander. Try to tell you a little bit about the deck, show you this visual spoiler. I build all my decks on deckstats.net. There is, what's the other one? Oh, Freeman uses it. Tapped Out is the biggest card building website. If you want to build a commander deck, go to edhrec.com. This does not have every answer for you, but this deck aggregates people's builds of different commanders, and it is an amazing starting point for you to help you build. Let's go to the commander we're going to talk about first. They recently added this full decks thing where you could see what people like what style of deck they have and how much it costs and the breakdown of the deck. You can see this card on different websites. You can see people who've done videos or articles about these cards that they get from everywhere. You can see the themes that the deck is built around, like wheeling, the budget level, the tribe, how the average deck breakdown is, how many decks have been submitted with this card, the price of the deck. I think they switched to using Card Kingdom for their prices recently. You can view it as a card that just exists in other things, a list of decks, the average deck, and then the bulk of it is these signature cards, top cards, and then major cards of different types. They tell you the synergy with the deck, which is like how many people play this in this deck versus other deck, what percentage of all the decks that were put up. This is the resource for Commander. I've had people come into the store that I go to recently. I've had 1 or 2 new guys, and I always say go to EDHREC. Even though it doesn't have every answer for you, it's an amazing starting point to think about. Or you could do your own thing, but it's an amazing start. Anyway, so let us talk about Commander and how appropriate that the first Commander I'm going to talk about is actually the card that got me to build Commander. I played Magic since 2010 summer. I took a hiatus when I was going to school at Drexel University because I didn't have any people to play with. Then I came home for a year, played a bunch with my friends, went to Utah, kind of took a hiatus again, came back, got back into it, and now I'm into it. Arjun was in this set symbol right here on Arjun is for Commander 2016. And when that was spoiled, I was interested in a lot of the cards, but I saw Arjun, and I actually thought it was really cool, and I really wanted to build a deck around him. And for a long time, I thought Commander seemed like a silly format. But I was getting tired of building. Up till that point, I had just played Kitchen Table. I've never played Modern. I've never played Standard outside of one deck recently. So I was just always playing Kitchen Table, and I got kind of tired because I always put more thought into it than my friends. And Commander is an excellent way to level the playing field. Even a dirtily Commander deck, as long as you're not playing like a competitive deck, your deck is going to do something. Like, there's not enough. Even bad cards in Magic can end up being really good, and that's what I love about Commander, is that I've seen decks with cards that I would never play just turn into monsters based on the card. So I saw Arjun, and I wanted to build a cool wheelie deck. There's a bigger commander for this kind of thing, Nekusar. He's very competitive, though, and very mean. Arjun is just... So all my decks fit into different archetypes, but I've realized a lot of my decks can turn into, like, not combo, but kind of solid win decks. This is a very rambly series, by the way, I promise. The thing is, though, it's always one thing I've found that is incredibly important in Commander is to have a win condition. It's great to build a value machine, but there has to be something that helps you win that you want to shoot for every time. You can't just go off with no idea. A guy made a comment to me the first time I comboed off with a deck that I'll probably cover next episode, when he said, God, I hate when people don't know what their win condition is. And I realized I need to have a win condition in every deck, because your goal is to win. Or you're playing Group Hug, which is a deck I had a Group Hug deck that I took apart, but that even had a win condition. So I've tried to sculpt decks that have a way to win that they are always working towards, or that they are just doing fun things, but there always is a win condition in mind. So anyway, let's look at Arjun. He's a 6 mana cost, 4 blue and a red. Legendary creature Sphinx Wizard, which I saw this art and I also thought it was awesome. Flying 5/5. Whenever you cast a spell, put the cards in your hand on the bottom of your library in any order, then draw that many cards. This is, again, what can be called a wheel effect. The base card for that is Wheel of Fortune. It would be great in this deck, but it's too expensive. Fuck it, we're already doing it. So we're going to go to tcgplayer.com, which is where I buy all my cards from. They don't endorse me or anything. I'm sad. I love TCG Player. This is everywhere I've ever bought cards from singles. Wheel of Fortune. How much do you cost right now? It's very expensive. It's one of those cards that will never be reprinted. Yeah. Oh, wow. The Judge promo is $280. Oh, 82? Okay, that's expensive. Obviously, it's expensive. I don't know if I'll ever buy one. If I ever get serious enough, I might. There are definitely cards that I would like to expand into having. Yeah, I'm never buying a beta or alpha one. My God. I also only buy near mint cards. I'm one of those snobs. I just don't like seeing damaged cards. I might buy a Judge promo someday, but not anytime soon. That's a lot of money. Anyway, back to Arjun. But Wheel of Fortune says, you can't read it, but it's every player discards their hand into their graveyard and draws 7 cards. That's the original wheel, is wheeling away your hand and drawing new cards. And Arjun doesn't do that. He replaces the cards in your hand with cards from the top, and they go on your bottom. So this means as long as you're drawing cards, you're cycling through your deck really fast. What does this also invoke? You want to do things that trigger off of drawing cards. Drawing cards are great. So, this is the visual spoiler thing on deck stats. They have all these cool tabs. I love using deck stats for deck building. I wish I could be sponsored by all these sites. They're so great. I love all these sites. So, basic lands, land suites, nothing amazing. It's mostly normal. Is the red-blue color combination. Every combination beyond monocolor, so there's white, blue, black, red, green, and colorless, sort of, are the 5 colors of Magic. And then there are names for all of the 2 and 3 color combinations. 4 and 5 don't really, because they're kind of too common. Usually they're like null green is everything but green. I'm not going to name them all because that's not really the point of this video, but this is my Izzet deck. And Izzet is the color of the ring I wear on my finger because my girlfriend believes I am very Izzet. And I had a ring for a long time from my previous girlfriend that was Boros, but the ink had faded and everything, and my current girlfriend said, no, you're more of an Izzet kind of guy. So she bought me a cool black ring that sits on my middle finger. Anyway. So most of this is going to be a normal Izzet mana base. Obviously, I don't have tons of money, so I don't have like original dual lands, which are insanely expensive. I want to buy a handful of them someday, but they're like hundreds each for my favorite deck. We will not be covering that deck today unless I get to deck number 5. But there are a few concessions to being Arjun here. Blighted Cataract is great for drawing cards. Same with Desolate Lighthouse. Forgotten Cave and Lonely Sandbar are the 1 mana cost cycling lands. There are 2 colorless mana cycling lands where you can play them tapped to generate mana or cycle them, which is discard it and draw a new one. But I don't like paying that much, and I don't want to ruin my mana base with too many tapped lands in this deck. Halimar Depths is great for sorting your top cards. Islands, Steam Vents, Briar Bluff, Shivan Reef. Maze of Ith is in there because this deck really struggles early, and while it's missing a land drop, if you play this too early that you want to cast Arjun, I can't do anything against early aggro decks that target me, so I have to have something like that. Temple of the False God. This deck has enough big, beefy spells that you don't need the color super, super bad. And then we get into the artifacts, most of which are built around ramping or card draw. Alhammar's Archive. This has two things where if you gain life, you gain twice as much life, and if you draw any card except your first card, you draw 2 cards. This is an engine if I want to win with the card Laboratory Maniac, which that other channel is named after, if I could find him. If you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, instead of losing the game, you win the game. So if you have Lab Maniac out and Alhammar's Archive, and Arjun, if you can string a few spells together, you can draw your entire deck in about, depending on how big your initial hand was, about 5 spells and win the game on the spot, which I have done before. I actually did it last time I won with the deck, but it was due to another card too. But yeah, this card is also very dangerous, though, because if you don't have Laboratory Maniac on the field, this is not a May ability. So I've been in situations where I've actually almost lost and drawn about 40 cards and had to find a way to get Arjun to die or win instantly because I was going to die to decking myself by putting... Because Arjun's ability, if you put 4 cards on the bottom and then draw 4, with Alhammar's Archive, you draw 8. So it's very dangerous. But like I said, with Lab Maniac, it can be a win condition quickly. Commander Sphere, ramp, Dark Steel Ingot, ramp. Diviner's Wand can actually be its own win condition, which is hilarious in this deck. Equipped creature has, whenever you draw a card, this creature gets +1/+1 and gains flying until end of turn and pay 4 mana to draw a card. Whenever a wizard comes into play, you may attach it for free to Diviner's Wand. Arjun is a wizard. Play Diviner's Wand early, cast Arjun, cast 1 spell, and if you had like 4 cards in your hand, suddenly Arjun gets +4/+4, and he's a 9/9, and suddenly, within 2 moves, you can kill someone with commander damage. I have done this before, where I've killed someone with commander damage based on cycling my hand about 4 times and swinging with lethal commander damage with Arjun, which in the commander format is 21 damage from any given commander card will win you the game, will kill someone. Or their life total goes 0, or all the other normal win conditions. So I've totally done that before. Elixir of Immortality, if you're cycling your library too much and you find yourself running low, it's great to just throw your library back in. I like to have 1 card in most of my decks that has an effect like this, because I haven't actually seen a mill deck, but one of the first people I ever played Magic with on a regular basis loved to play mill. And also, I just always worry about grindy games going very long or some important piece going to the yard. So I like to have 1 kind of put your graveyard back effect or be kind of a graveyardy deck, because otherwise I worry. And this deck really doesn't have any way to get stuff from the graveyard. Howling Mine, everyone draws an extra card on their turn, except I get to benefit more because not only am I drawing the extra card, but I'm also getting that draw a card. Ramp. Is it Cluestone, Signet? Lightning Greaves, almost any deck where you want to rely on any creature at a given point, Lightning Greaves is the best. Having Shroud on a creature and Haste for no equip cost and 2 mana initially is just fantastic. One of the best equipments out there. Sapphire Medallion, kind of ramp, but for blue spells that are expensive, and there's a lot of them in this deck, as you'll see. So I love having this in any deck that is usually 2-color, or 3 or more if it leans very heavily on one. Like this deck leans heavily on blue. There's another deck I have that also leans heavily on blue. And if like half of your deck or more is 1 color, I recommend a Medallion. They're just super duper good for ramp. Thought Vessel is like Reliquary Tower, you have no maximum hand size. When I'm drawing a lot of cards, or especially when Alhammar's Archive's on the field, I need protection against discarding all those cards, and those 2 are great. Obviously, it's a little bit of ramp. Fever Visions is a fun little card that actually gets people real good. It's kind of a Howling Mine that draws people at end step when they can't use it, but I have a lot of instants, so I usually can. And it just pings people. Just 2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage. Your hand's too full, 2 damage, 2 damage. And it really actually builds up. Jace's Erasure, it's an alternate win condition. I don't love it. It mills people. Whenever I draw a card, you may have target player mill 2 cards. That's put 2 cards directly from your library into your graveyard. If I'm cycling or doing something with Alhammar's Archive, it's also kind of a win condition. Me drawing 4 cards and milling someone for 8 is just a fantastic win condition. Sphinx's Tutelage, I might as well skip around a little, is the upgraded version of that where if those 2 cards share a color, it happens again, and I can, at late game, if I have absolutely nothing else to do, I can draw, then discard a card for 6 mana. But you almost ignore that bottom line, and it's just, if you look at the top, it's just a 1 more mana for a better version of Jace's Erasure, which is fine. Jace's Sanctum, make all my spells cheaper. Whenever I cast, I scry one. That's just great value. Leyline of Anticipation, and that's actually funny what's next to it, Omniscience. So these are my enchantments, by the way. I forgot to say I was switching over to my, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 enchantments. Leyline of Anticipation. You can cast non-land cards as though they had flash. I actually 2 weeks ago tomorrow won a game with that where a guy with a dragon deck attacked me and would have killed me. I had a Leyline of Anticipation on the field. I cast Omniscience. Omniscience is one of the most busted cards in Magic's history, which is why it costs 10 mana. You may cast any card from your hand without paying their mana cost, which means all this is free. Like, anything up here is free. So, guy attacks me with dragons. I cast Omniscience. I cast a few spells. Arjun is on the field, and I manage to cycle into Lab Maniac and Alhamar's Archive, and I win the game during the opponent's attack step. It was hilarious. He was not very pleased. But Omniscience is busted. I have this card. So this was my first commander deck, and I built it kind of the quote-unquote Timmy/Tammy archetype, which is just build big, dumb things. Omniscience is one of those just great, like, I'm probably going to win the game within a turn or two, guys, so you better kill this thing, because making all your spells free from your hand, it's really good. Propaganda, again, I'm weak early, so hey, don't attack me unless you want to pay 2 mana for it, because you shouldn't attack me. Rhystic Study, busted card. Whenever any opponent pays a spell, they have to pay an extra mana, or I draw a card. The amount of people who don't pay for Rhystic Study is depressing. If you're ahead, you should always pay for Rhystic Study, because 1 card for 1 mana is great value, especially when you don't have to pay the mana. Blue Sun Zenith, I don't use it very often, but paying a bunch of mana if I need to at the end of someone's turn to draw a bunch of cards isn't never a bad thing. Brainstorm, it's an amazing card in decks with fetch lands, which I have only the Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds of to crack and go find a land to shuffle my library, shuffle these 2 cards away. But the amazing thing about Brainstorm is draw 3 cards means there are 3 draw triggers, which, as you'll see in a little bit, there are a bunch of cards that trigger off of drawing cards, which is amazing. Cryptic Command is one of the strongest blue spells ever printed. I have the full art foil one, which is gorgeous if you look it up on TCG Player. The only problem is the rules are complicated, so I don't recommend it if you don't know the card right. Luckily, I've seen the card enough that I know exactly what it does. Cyclonic Rift, busted blue card in every commander deck. Dig Through Time, amazing. Electrolyze, probably a card I could cut someday, but it's just so good to, especially if I have a way to make it cheaper, like just throw some little zapping around and draw a card. Factor Fiction, one of the strongest blue cards. You're guaranteed to get at least 1 card you want out of your top 5 cards, and you don't really care where the rest go, and it's only 4 mana, and it's an instant, so. Insidious Will is amazing for, it's just an expensive counterspell for sure, but choosing new targets for a spell or copying a spell is just such a valuable versatility. I run it in this deck and not in my more serious spell deck. Mystic Confluence is the more fair version of Cryptic Command that's still busted that they printed in the same edition as Arjun, actually. I'm not really going to go over every single card. I realize that it's taking a long time. So the thing is on screen, and I'm going to try to put the deck lists in the description if I can. Link to each of my deck lists so you guys can look at them. Let me try to hit interesting points. I don't really want to hit every card. You can see, though, that there's a lot of themes of drawing, like I said. I'm trying to look for cards. Insurrection is another I win card. I will probably take it out someday because it feels bad to just, oh, look, you played a lot of creatures. Well, why don't I steal all your creatures and kill everyone with them? But yeah, overall, and then we're getting into a lot of the win conditions of the deck, like Niv Mizzet the Firemind can be a win condition, Psychosis Crawler can be a win condition, Chasm Skulker triggers off drawing a card, which is why it's amazing, Kozilek can be a win condition. So overall, you can see that. So the idea of this deck, I guess is a good way to say it, is really about just drawing cards and controlling the game and keeping myself from dying and just constantly cycling through my deck and getting lots of value for drawing those cards. Like Jory N triggers off of casting more spells, draw a card. Dawson of Perfection turns my spells into creatures. Chasm Skulker makes a giant creature that turns into little ones if he dies. There's just Locust God, again, another amazing card in the deck, and probably someone you could turn into the commander without much effort for this deck, actually. Again, this deck is all about taking the words draw a card and making it into a value play, which is just so fun to attack some people through a different angle, which is part of why I like it. It's like Spellslinger, but also, oh, I'm drawing all these cards and you just happen to be dying at the same time. So it's a lot of fun. This is my original deck. It's probably one of my least powerful, but honestly, I don't know how much more I would even want to tune it up. It's just kind of a fun deck. I love to just cycle through it. If I was building it now, I'd probably make some cuts, make some changes. I don't know how much Dominaria is going to offer, but I don't know how much this deck will change over the years, but we'll see. I like this deck a lot, and I definitely have a deck in mind that is probably going to be cut someday for a deck that's been buzzing around in my head for a while now, but none soon because money. Anyway, though, so that is Arjun. That is my first deck. Let's move on to one of my newest commander decks, Breya, the Etherium Shaper. This deck is my artifact deck. Artifacts are one of the longest running things in Magic, and this deck is just such a... This is kind of a deck that the idea started out as just a silly thing, but Breya and artifacts are such a strong theme. On EDH Rec, there is a top commanders list, and there's command top for the week, the month, and all time. And as you see, Breya is number 3. There's a reason. Breya is amazing. So her ability, one of every color except green. So she's a 4-color commander, my most colored commander. And I used to have another 4-color deck that I took apart, my Group Hug deck. Legendary artifact creature human, 4/4. When she enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. Pay 2 mana, sacrifice 2 artifacts, choose 1. Deal 3 damage to a player. Give a creature -4/-4 until end of turn, or gain 5 life. Those are fantastic abilities. Turning 2 artifacts, which often have value in dying or going to the graveyard or cycling them or just doing anything with them, is so versatile. Giving a creature -4/-4 gets around indestructibility, which is big in Commander. I always think about indestructible things because indestructibility is one of the best ways to keep a creature from dying to board wipes that happen frequently in Commander. 3 damage to a player is just a great way to ping someone off if you have a ton of artifacts, and gaining 5 life has pulled me out of a pinch more than once. So this is a pretty classic artifact deck, except I didn't really go for a super competitive Breya build, although just by virtue of so many of these artifacts being value things, it's a great deck. I built her as Thopter Tribal because I love my little Thopter tokens. I got... in Unstable, they came out with full art blue Thopters for Breya, like her Thopter token, and they're gorgeous. I have them. I also got cool animated tokens from a site called Cardamajigs. So I have little 8-bit flappy Thopter. I'm going to show it. Cardamajigs. So these are their animated tokens. I was super into buying these for a little while, but my favorite one and the one that I use for this deck is these. These things are adorable. Look at them flap. They're so cute, and I love them. So these are colorless Thopters, and the Breya Thopters are blue. They look like those back there. And I just love Thopters. And they're so adorable. So I just built a Thopter deck. Lots of art. The mana base, as you can see, is definitely different. Some similarities like Terramorphic. Temple of False God, you just need mana in this deck. Spire, but then there's lots of differences, like Rupture Spire and Transguild Promenade are budget constraints, I guess you could call them. They're not amazing lands if you're budgetless, obviously, but getting a mana for any color from a land without paying tons of life like City of Brass or or Mana Confluence is a great feeling. The Tri-lands, Ash Barrens came with the deck. I have it in there still. The Artifact lands, Academy Ruins is an amazingly busted card. For 2 mana, just throw an artifact from your graveyard on top, which usually has value of something other than just being a creature. Mentor's Fair is busted. Other than that, pretty standard. I could probably cut Reliquary Tower from this deck. I never end up drawing that many cards, but it's just habit to have it in there. But I'm learning that it's not always worth it, especially considering how many colorless lands I do have. 1, 2, 3, Buried Ruin also. 3, 4, 5, 6 colorless lands. 7 colorless lands is kind of a lot in a deck that has about 34, and it needs all colors to do things. So probably a cut someday, but I'd like to see some land that's good enough to replace it. But then we get into the actual artifacts, obviously of which there are many, 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 many. Like I said, this deck doesn't have tons of explosiveness like there are some online Breya decks. But this is just value, like all the signets, Chromatic Lantern to get all my colors fixed, Commander Sphere. Darksteel Forge is busted. People leave this around too much, or don't counter it, because all it is my artifacts are indestructible. That's amazing. It's so stinking good. Yeah, I've cheated this out before, and it's just like, I don't know if I've ever lost a game when I resolved a Darksteel Forge, because then you're just playing at your own pace. No one can make you do what you don't want to when your artifacts say you don't destroy them. Ichor Wellspring enters the battlefield or is put into a graveyard, draw a card. That doesn't seem amazing, but then you think about sacrificing it to Breya, so not only are you getting half of the Breya value, but you're also getting a card draw out of it. Same with Mycosynth Wellspring. Again, this is that graveyard and entering the battlefield synergy. Panharmonicon is one of my favorite cards ever. I think I have about 10 of them, and I'm going to sell a whole bunch because I just don't need that many. I had them for casual decks. But if an artifact or creature entering the battlefield, artifact being key, entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Doubling anything is good in Magic, and Panharmonicon doubling enter the battlefield triggers, which are one of the easiest abilities to put on any card in Magic, is fantastic. Like, look at this card, Spine of Isha, enters the battlefield, destroy any permanent. Hey, if you have Panharmonicon out, you destroy 2 permanents. That's really good. Or Ichor Wellspring. Oh, pay 2 mana, draw 2 cards, and have an artifact. Mycosynth Wellspring, search for 2 basics, put them into your hand. Amazing. Everything double. Like, Panharmonicon is such a great card in this deck. It's so fun. Skull Clamp is amazing in this deck. You turn your Thopters, they're 1/1s by default, into 2 cards for 1 mana, and it's an artifact. So what's not to love? Spine of Isha, like I said, is fantastic colorless removal. It gets around color protection, and destroying permanents means that if there are lands that are extremely good, especially in the era of the Ixalan flip lands, enchantments that flip to lands, destroying any permanent or lands is really, really key. Cabal Coffers is still a huge land in Commander, with Orborg generating tons of mana. There's lots of lands that are just good, and Spine of Isha is one of the few things to get around it. Sword of the Meek and Thopter Foundry is a combo. What you do is if you have both on the field, you pay 1 mana to sacrifice the Sword of the Meek. That creates a 1/1 Thopter. You gain a life, and then the Sword of the Meek is in the graveyard, sees the 1/1 creature, which it says whenever a 1/1 creature comes into play under your control, you may return Sword of the Meek from your graveyard to play. So if you have Thopter Foundry out, you pay 1 mana, sacrifice the sword. There's a Thopter that appears, you gain a life, and the sword comes out of the graveyard and attaches to that Thopter. So for every mana you have open, you can get a Thopter and a life, and the Sword of the Meek just does all the work for you automatically. It's a great value engine, a way to get little Thopters for the deck, which is why I love it. Trading Post is one of the best cards for turning things you don't need into things you do need. Discard a card, gain 4 life, pay a life, get a 0/1 creature. I wish it was an artifact. Sacrifice a creature, return an artifact from your graveyard to your hand. In this case, most artifact, like the Thopters are artifact creatures, so they do both of the bottom abilities, or sacrifice an artifact, draw a card. So you can just cycle anything you don't need into something that's better. It's amazing. Anointed Procession. If an effect would create one or more tokens under your control, create twice that many. Again, doubling things. There's a card called Parallel Lives, which does this in green. But this deck doesn't have green. But it has Anointed Procession, so if you play Breya, oh look, I get 4 Thopters because I have 4. Again, Efficient Construction, cast an artifact, get a Thopter token. So every artifact spell you cast, oh, I also come with a little 1/1 Thopter. It's just a little Thopter, it's not scary. Mechanized Production. If I enchant a Thopter with this, at the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted artifact. Then if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name, you win. If you enchant something named Thopter, it doesn't matter what color they are. If you have 8 Thopters on your turn, you win. So if you cast this, I've cast this on a Thopter, no one had removal, or more specifically, I believe in one game I had Darkspell Forge out. Oh look, my indestructible Thopter couldn't get killed. I now have 8 Thopters. I now win the game. Storm the Vault is the newest card in Ixalan that I bought for this deck. I have not gotten to cast it yet, which makes me very sad. But whenever one or more creatures you control deal damage to a player, create a colorless treasure artifact token, which you can sacrifice to add 1 mana. And then at the beginning of your end step, if you have 5 or more artifacts, if you're casting this in this deck, you should already have 5 artifacts. So at the end of your turn, you transform Storm the Vault into... Oh, the page didn't show it. Boo. Well, let's go to magiccards.info so I can show you. Really? Are you going to show me what it transforms into or what? Vault of Catlacan. Which is based on the super ancient and broken vintage playable land called Tolarian Academy. And this says, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. That's a pretty good land. Or add a blue mana for each artifact you control. So for 4 mana, you can play a card that says, I'm going to turn into a land and be a banned in Commander land. Tolarian Academy is banned in Commander because it's too good. So if you want to pay 4 mana for a land that's banned, go right ahead. I have sadly, as I said, not drawn or flipped it yet since Rivals of Ixalan came out. But I've only played about 2 or 3 times with the deck since. And I lost one, and I think I just didn't get the chance to play it another time. Thopter Spy Network, another busted card for Thopters. Get a free, if you have an artifact, get a Thopter, and when your artifacts damage a player, draw a card. Great value. Again, this is what I'm talking about with cards that nowhere else in Magic would they see play. No one plays Thopter Spy Network outside of Commander. You just don't. But in Commander, this is so much value for 4 mana. Like only in Commander can you get away with a card that doesn't do anything right away. And that's what's so great, because so many cards in Magic's history have been created that don't really do anything right away. And for standard, modern, whatever, that's not good enough. But for Commander, it's hard. There's always a joke when a new set comes out that if something doesn't seem very good, someone will say it's good for Commander. That's because in Commander you can play almost any tribe you want. Any theme. It's just so good. It's so fun. I love Commander, and there's a reason it's the only format I play. Anguished Unmaking, it's just unconditional non-land removal for 3, exiling for 3 life. I'll always take exiling over destroying something. There's a reason this is in here and not Vindicate, which is sorcery speed also. Destroy any non-land permanent. I'll pay 3 life to exile at instant speed any day. Cyclonic Rift again. Whir of Invention again. This deck, I largely built it after I saw a lot of Thopter stuff in Kaladesh and Aether Revolt. Whir of Invention is one of the best cards from Aether Revolt for artifacts. It's Chord of Calling, look that card up, for blue and for artifacts. What's not to love? And Improvise is an amazing ability in this deck. You can see that Whir of Invention and the next card, Battle of the Bridge, both have it. You can tap artifacts, which includes lots of little Thopter tokens, for an extra mana for this X cost, and give a creature -X/-X and gain X life, which is just great little removal. Turn 4 Thopters into killing a 4/4 creature and gaining 4 life for 1 black mana. Who wouldn't? Like, that's amazing. Whir of Invention, turn all your Thopters into, which I've done before, a Darksteel Forge. Oh, look. Oh, at the end of your turn, I got a Darksteel Forge, and now my stuff can't die. Whoops. Open the Vaults. I force myself to play this and Scrap Mastery. I always get nervous because I don't like giving value to my opponents at all. Return all artifacts and enchantment cards from all graveyards to the battlefield under their owner's control. The only time I do this is when I have enough mana to set up using Breya to sacrifice all of my artifacts, get value from Breya, like gain a bunch of life, kill a bunch of creatures, whatever, then cast this and be like, okay, you get a few things back, but I get a ton of stuff back. Same with Scrap Mastery. If you can set up removing all your own stuff to your graveyard to get the value of bringing it back next turn with one of these two cards, then it's worth it. But the danger is that your opponents have good artifacts, or in the case of Open the Vaults, enchantments that are in their graveyard, and you have to eat them getting the value in exchange for you getting the value more. Reverse Engineer, again, with some Thopters, it's 2 mana, draw 3 cards. It's just great. It's just a simple, great card. You don't get much better draw than this without paying tons of money. That's the other thing. This deck is great for being kind of budgety. There's so many, again, artifact cards that are not amazing on their own, but in this deck, they're fantastic. See, Healy's Artistry. I've done amazing things with this card. Choose one or both. You always choose both. Create a token that's a copy of an artifact. Oh, you have a great card? I'd like it. Or, oh, I really like this trading post I have. Or this Panharmonicon I have. I've done that before. I really love my Panharmonicon. Why don't I have another one? Or create a token of target creature, except it's also an artifact. So if your opponent has an amazing creature, I'd love an artifact version of that. Why not? This card is expensive for what it does, but when you cast it, you can blow people out. You can get so much value. And the thing is, so many of the creatures in this deck are just enter the battlefield. Like you can see down here. I'll get to them in a minute, but so many of these creatures have like an enter the battlefield, make Thopters, or just some useful ability that when they stack on top of each other, just fantastic. Supreme Verdict. Any deck that has blue and white should be running this as the board wipe, or because it's better than Wrath of God because it can't be countered. Destroy all creatures. Sometimes you just need to blow up the board. Daretti Ingenious Iconoclast. I love the conspiracy sets, and Daretti's such a cool card. I have both versions of Daretti and 2 versions of Tezzeret, which are my planeswalkers for the deck. Both of these versions of Tezzeret, fantastic. They're such good value. I think anyone who plays Magic knows these 3 artifact cards are 3 of the best. Tezzeret Agent of Bolas digs for cards and turns things into 5/5s or kills people. I've killed people with his ultimate before. This one is just so much value. Daretti, throw away junk cards or artifacts to get back from your graveyard. For new cards, sacrificing. For Daretti, for 4 mana, if you already have your Darksteel Forge in your graveyard somehow, or if you do that, his +2, you can -2 sacrifice a Thopter to get a freaking Darksteel Forge. It's amazing. I think this Daretti is kind of undersold. 3 mana planeswalkers are always looked on as they have to be insanely good or they're junk. He is a lot of sneaky value. For 3 mana, you can cast him, sack an artifact, and destroy an artifact or creature. So 3 mana for a solid removal spell for one of those things, sacrificing usually a Thopter, is not bad value. And just grinding up little 1/1s for Breya to eat is not bad whatsoever. And ultimating him to make 3 token copies of any artifact in a graveyard or on the battlefield, like, oh, I make a bunch of Spine of Ishsa tokens, or I make a bunch of, even if you just make a bunch of Breya tokens, that's 6 Thopters that you get, because the legend rule means they all go away. But you get 6 Thopters. Like, there's just such easy value. Baleful Strix, one of the best 2-drop artifacts ever. A 1/1 Flying Death Touch, which basically says, if you don't have Indestructible, don't attack me. And draw a card. What's not to love? Duplicant, exile removal on an artifact creature. Again, just busted. Especially when you do fun cycling things like sacrifice it to Breya, get it back, use a new removal spell. It's just insane value. Etherium Sculptor, your artifacts. I have to resist going over every card. There's so many. You can look at the deck list. So many of these creatures just have enter the battlefield value or leave battle value, metamorph. Like, being able to sacrifice all of these artifacts to Breya, usually have some way in my hand, like Myr Retriever itself, or like Academy Ruins the Land, to get things back. Sharoon. Solemn Simulacrum. When it enters the battlefield, search for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, and shuffle. Then when it dies, draw a card. I played a game recently with Solemn where I cycled Solemn into my graveyard and back out 5 times at least. That means 5 times I searched for a basic, put it onto the battlefield, emptied my library of basics almost, and drew a card. It's just, this deck is just a value machine, and that's what I love about it. There's a few cards that I might cut someday. There's a few cards that are in here that aren't amazing, that just kind of bring Thopters along for the ride. Maverick Thopterist is just a fun card to have in the deck, but it's not amazing. Marionette Master's a win condition, though. Padim is fun. Aethersworn's fun. Fairy Artisans is one of the most busted cards in Commander. They're good in any blue deck, but in this deck especially. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, create a token that's a copy of that, except it's also an artifact. Then exile all the other tokens. Why is this busted? Fairy Artisans is busted because if an opponent plays a creature with an enter the battlefield trigger, like most of my creatures, you also get that enter the battlefield trigger. Then you have an artifact copy of that creature. Guess what you can do with artifacts? Oh, I don't know. Sacrifice it to Breya for more value. It's just, every card in this deck brings so much value. It's going to be hard to make cuts someday. Herald of Anguish is a card I'd probably cut. It's another sacrifice outlet for artifacts. If I have enough things on the field, I can cast it for just 2 black mana. Everybody discarding a card is pretty good in Commander, but it just doesn't do enough. And Maverick Thopterist brings 2 Thopters along, which is a lot of fun. He's a 2/2 body, and I can pay him for cheap. But I don't know. Someday I suspect there'll be cards that come out. And like I said, when Dominaria happens, I'm going to do a video about all my changes to this stuff. So, but anyway, yeah, so this is my Breya deck. This is my most value engine deck, and I just love it. This deck is so much fun to just grind the machine gears. It appeals to the engineer in me to build these cool machines of value. And this deck's fantastic. I'd love to keep upgrading it. I want to make sure I keep it on the Thopter theme, but it's kind of creeping in towards just artifact value. But there's cards like, but there's also the Kaladesh Inventions, which are so gorgeous, which I'm collecting, and like so many of them fit in here. So like I want to put a Mox Opal in this deck someday, but what do I cut for that? I don't know. But yeah, so anyway, I love this deck. Let's move on to Row Fight the Power. Depala. Depala is the deck that I snap built when my favorite block of all time, the Kaladesh first set, came out. I bought 2 boxes of Kaladesh. Kaladesh is my favorite plane by far. I will never not love Kaladesh. For a long time, what was even my favorite? Ravnica I really loved. I went through a phase where I bought foil basic Ravnica lands. But then when Kaladesh was spoiled, I remember the hype. Mark Rosewater, he was hyping up Kaladesh as his favorite design in a long time, since the original Innistrad, which is one of the most famous sets ever. People seem to agree that Kaladesh is not that good. I personally just love the aesthetic so much. The plane of inventors, I mean, I'm an engineering guy. It appeals to me on such a deep level. The art was gorgeous. I wish I could build a deck based on every commander from Kaladesh. I mean, Thopters. Breya could be a commander from Kaladesh. Like, there's a reason I have lots of just fun Aether Revolt and Kaladesh cards in here. They're not as amazing as some cards, but I love the set, and I love being able to represent those cards. It's just such an awesome feeling. My final commander that I'll probably cover next time in the second episode is also a Kaladesh commander. And I just... I love Kaladesh. Depala, 1 blue, 1 red, and white. So my Boros deck, because like I said, I originally was a Boros guy, because my first ever favorite card was Boros. That's the name of red-white. Other dwarves you control get +1/+1. That means almost nothing. Each vehicle you control gets +1/+1 as long as it's a creature. Whenever Depala becomes tapped, you may pay X. If you do, reveal the top X cards of your library, put all dwarf and vehicle cards from them into your hand, and then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. I also was, right when Kaladesh was coming out, or shortly before Kaladesh came out, I had seen one of my favorite anime for the first time, Gurren Lagann, one of my absolute favorite anime ever. And I custom got, if you know Gurren Lagann, Ro Fight the Power is one of the songs of the show, and I designed my own card sleeves to go with this deck. This is my vehicle deck. This is also, sadly, the deck I will probably take apart due to just sheer lack of power and workability. But you know what? I'll probably never take this deck apart, but I'll probably put it on the side someday. If I was going to replace a deck in my case to bring to my store and play with other people, it would probably sadly be Depala. But that doesn't mean I don't absolutely love this deck. It's just not... Vehicles are just inherently not an insanely powerful thing. So the way vehicles work, and the reason I built this deck, is vehicles are, like you'd think, just cars. Here they are. Here's some of them, for example. The way they work is they have a thing called a crew cost. You have to tap creatures with total power equal to or greater than that crew number to turn the vehicle into a creature. Now, usually, they are above grade. They are stronger than they look, than a creature of that converted mana cost would be in exchange for not being a creature all the time, for having to make creatures pilot or crew those artifacts to make them creatures. The problem is there are only a handful of really good vehicles that have been printed. They were only printed in Kaladesh and Aether Revolt extensively. Then there have been a handful that were printed on Ixalan. There were like a pair of pirate ships. They were all trash. There was one vehicle from there that came into this deck at all, and it's probably not even worth running. And it seems like vehicles might show up again, but outside of maybe like getting the Weatherlight in like a Dominaria set or something, I don't see it being an archetype that gets populated very much, and I don't want it to just be another artifact deck because I already have Breya, so it's kind of like I might as well shelve it just because there's just never going to be a lot of enhancements to the deck, if you know what I mean. But that's not to say I don't absolutely love the deck. Crewing up vehicles, especially the one time, there's a video on Facebook, not on the public Facebook, the Timpedia Facebook, but my Facebook, my girlfriend took the first time I ever played this deck and managed to crew a vehicle with another vehicle. I crewed two vehicles and then had those vehicles both crew a bigger vehicle, and I screamed, "We're gonna combine," which is the line which is one of the biggest lines in Gurren Lagann. It was a lot of fun. It was very silly of me, but anyway, let's talk about Depala. Got a pretty standard set of lands. You can see that there's obviously a more focus on red and white than Breya, but then many of the lands are the same. The artifact lands are still here: Inventor's Fair, Buried Ruin. More red and white things. The cycling lands, because red and white are historically terrible at card advantage. Slayer Stronghold is just good to maybe give your creatures the power to crew things, or have your creatures attack with +2/+0 vigilance and haste, and then also crew vehicles. Then we move into the artifacts, and we find that there are a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 vehicles in this deck. And if I'm being honest, at least 3 of them could probably be cut. But it's frustrating. There are so many cards in this deck that are sick. The vehicles are so cool. The art is so pretty. But the other hand, this deck, it's the problem with vehicles. I know I'm going all over the place. In most cases, a vehicle is not a creature unless you crew it. How do you crew it? You have creatures. What do you need in the deck? Creatures to crew your vehicles. Well, why not just use creatures? It's part of the problem. This deck probably could use a rebuild from the ground up at some point, but I doubt I ever will, just because I partially don't want to sink the money into it, but also because I like where it is now. It's a fun, casual deck that has won games before, but usually it doesn't super duper work. But it's my most aggro-y deck. It's my most like Boros deck. Obviously, it's my only purely red-white deck, but there are decks that do what this does better, that are also more synergistic and fun, and get more cards more often, which are just more exciting. So This deck will probably be shelved someday, but I'm never going to take it apart because I love the vehicle theme. If you look, we have Aethersphere, Bomat. Sky Sovereign is gorgeous. My jaw dropped when I saw this card. Oh my god, I love it. Peace Walker's cool. Heart of Kirin is super pretty. Smuggler's Copter is so good it was banned in Standard. Untethered Express, Peace Walker Claws, Renegade Freighter. Fleetwheel Cruiser, so cool. Just the art of all of these. Daredevil Dragster. Cultivators, Conqueror's Galleon, the only one from Ixalan that made it in here. I just love these cards. They're just so cool. And then I have some cards that I really went out of my way to spend a lot of money on. I have my Invention Mana Vault in this deck. Again, it's something that it could probably be better suited somewhere else, but this deck is supposed to be fun, and it is fun. I got my Mana Ramp, Gilded Lotus, Citron Archive, Hammer of Porphyros, probably cut someday, because just giving my creatures haste doesn't mean much when they should just be piloting cars, which they can do as soon as you cast them. Sensei's Divining Top, try to give my red-white deck some way to get good cards. Scourglass. Like, this deck just has so many... The other reason I wouldn't want to take this deck apart, it just has so many unique cards that would never be played anywhere else. Caught in the Brights. Pacifism. Whenever a vehicle I control attacks, exile the creature. Why not just run Swords to Plowshares or Path of Exile or something? Well, because this deals with vehicles. Aerial Modification. You would never play this card outside of draft or in a Depala deck because it turns a vehicle into a permanent creature that's also flying. This and Siege Modification are the only two cards that stop your artifacts from needing to crew to be vehicles. And these things are bombs early. If you cast Smuggler Copters on turn 2 or Heart of Kirin and then a Siege Modification on turn 3, you're looking at like a 7 or 6 power attack that no one has an answer for. That is the perfect scenario, but the problem with this deck is it almost never comes together. In a 100-card format where you only have one and the cards aren't that good on their own, it just doesn't happen that much. But Tempered Steel, never going to run that anywhere else. True Conviction, Boros Charm, Built to Smash. When would you ever run Built to Smash in any other deck? Deflecting Palm, Path to Exile, Return to Dust. There's just so many good white and red cards that I'm never going to be able to play anywhere else. I have a staple of Planeswalkers, Chandra, Torch of Defiance, my favorite artist now. Her beautiful art for this. It's just such a good all-around. Again, Kaladesh, though, that's another big thing. Duretti, again, can't put the red-black one in, but this one's just so good. Nahiri the Harbinger, again, a lot of the cards in this deck are like, I want to put Boros cards somewhere. And damn it, I'll have a Boros deck to do it. Start your engines. Turn all your vehicles into creatures until end of turn, and everything gets +2/+0. Again, you would only ever play this in this deck. Remember the Fallen, bring your stuff back. Aeronaut Admiral, Akiri Lineslinger from Commander 2017. No. Oh my god, going back to Arjun, he was Commander 2015. This is Commander 2016, Akiri Lineslinger. I keep forgetting that Commander, unlike Cars, is not ahead a year. She's, again, when you, like... She goes in an artifact deck. This is my Boros artifact deck. She's just super fun. Aurelia the War Leader. Combustible Gear Hulk. Duragar Hedge Mage. Duplicant again. Fairgrounds Warden. Like, some dwarves are thrown in. Srom. Veteran Motorist. Wormcoil Engine. Jorkadine. Like, and my personal favorite all-time card, Gisela Blade of Gold Knight. This was my favorite card when I first got into Magic. I thought the art was gorgeous. I was at a time in my life where I constantly played a dual-wielding character in Dungeons & Dragons. Dealing double damage and taking half damage is busted. Gisela is the card that I have insisted I never buy a non-foil of her because I love her. She is my first Magic Bay is Gisela. And I was heartbroken when I saw what they did to her in Shadows over Innistrad. But anyway, let's keep moving on. So I know I skipped over a lot, but there's just so many little cards in here that you don't use anywhere else. But I love this deck because of this fun little... It's one of those decks where, like I was saying, it's built out of cards that you would never see anywhere else and are not amazing, but in Commander they can shine. But unfortunately, so many of these are just so low value, and it's so hard to build synergy without going... The other thing is, I didn't want to go into, like, Breya, look at all my artifacts type of deck. I wanted this to be about vehicles, and there's just not much support there. So a lot of I intentionally have a lot of subpar cards, which means I might put it on the side someday. But there's so many fun cards in this deck, and I love this deck. And I love I love the whole crewing vehicles, and Depala is such a cool, the scarf and the pilot get up, and it's just fuck. I love Kaladesh, man. Anyway, let's move on to our final deck for the day for Commend to Me Episode 1. Sibling Rivalry, aka my Gisa and Geralf zombie deck. Also known as the deck that does the aggro creature wide punch better than Breya and Depala. This is the deck that I originally had as another commander. I believe this is the only deck where I ever changed the commander after I built it. Originally, this deck was commanded by a zombie known as Grimgrid, Corscorn. His thing is that he's a 5/5 for 5 who doesn't untap and comes in tapped when you play him, but you have to sacrifice a creature to untap and put a 1/1 counter on him. But whenever he attacks, you can destroy a creature depending the player you're attacking controls and put another 1/1 counter on him. He gets real big real fast. Problem is, he's basically just a tough guy in the command zone, but this deck, I wanted my zombie deck to be more grindy value zombie deck, like Swarm of Zombies, than Grimgrin's Voltron, big attacky guy, which is a totally viable deck, but I hadn't built the deck that way. Then we get back to Innistrad and Shadows over Innistrad before Kaladesh comes out, and lo and behold, the two of the favorite characters from the plane of Innistrad, Gisa and Geralf. Gisa is currently in the deck. Geralf is not. Two of the fan favorites who had been printed in Commander products earlier. I believe this is Commander 2014, I want to say, where they were printed. I think so. I don't remember. They finally had a combined card of Gisa and Geralf. The story is that they hate each other and they constantly fight, so seeing them work together because of what happened during Eldritch Moon is the best part. When they are a 4/4 for 2 and a blue and a black, so 4 mana total. Legendary creature, human wizard, which seems weird because it's a shared card, but they're both wizards. When they enter the battlefield, mill the top 4 cards of your library, and during each of your turns, you may cast a zombie creature card from your graveyard 1 time. Amazing value. Grindy, grindy, grindy. That's the name of the game for me. As you can see, also, the mana base is very different. I have a lot of the same things, blue-white lands, or blue-black lands. Minamo, School at Water's Edge, which lets me untap target legendary permanent. That is a holdover from when it was a Grimgrin deck. I could easily get rid of this, maybe for an island or something, but it doesn't really have a negative draw at this point, so I kind of just leave it in because I don't have the money, and why bother changing what doesn't hurt you? Other than that, Gaia Reach Sanitarium. There's a card called Mikokoro at Water's Edge, I think it's called. It's a land that you pay 2 mana and every player draws a card. Well, I don't want everyone to just draw a card. I want everyone to draw a card and then discard a card, because for me, that's double value with my commander, casting things from my graveyard, but for other people, it means they're permanently throwing away a card. Now, usually people throw away a land, but still value. Fetch land, Watery Grave, Orborg, and Cabal Coffers, the combo of lands that generate truckloads of mana. They're in the deck. This is the one deck they're in because this is my most black and blue heavy deck. So, it's pretty nothing else really crazy going on. Cryptovagadium is a great card in the deck. Late game when I have like 8 zombies in my graveyard, making a lot of mana is awesome. Bojuka Bog, every black deck that is 3 colors or less should have a Bojuka Bog in the deck, no question. A land that, in exchange for coming in tapped, exiles a graveyard when graveyard themes are one of the biggest themes in Commander. The second most played commander of all time is Marin of Clan Neltoth, a commander deck. Nekusar probably has graveyard stuff. Breya has graveyard stuff. Let's see who else. Alesha, graveyard. Sidisi, all graveyard. Carador, all graveyard. Prosh, probably graveyard. And Tassiger, graveyard, and maybe even Mizzix. And every deck can have elements of graveyard. Having Bojuka Bog is essential in any black deck with 3 or less colors. If you're in 4 or 5 colors, you probably can't support it. In which case, you're doing your own win condition anyway, because 4 or 5 colors means I'm playing my game. Please don't try to stop me. All right, artifacts. This deck is, as you would expect with zombies, all about sacrificing creatures, getting creatures that are great when they die, and just playing around with death. Such as Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar, turning my creatures into mana. Phyrexian Altar, with one card, with 2 zombies on the field, one of which is a specific one, turns into not infinite mana, but infinite death and life triggers. So those are always good. Lightning Greaves, busted. Skull Clamp. Oh, I'd like to turn all my zombies that I'm sacrificing into value, please. Bontu's Monument. A sneaky good card in that all your... So this is another one of those decks where there is 95% one color. In this case, black is by far the majority. Well, instead of doing Jet Medallion, which is all your black spells are less, most of my black spells are creature spells. So let's make creature black spells cost 1 less, and then also, whenever I cast any creature spell, everyone loses 1 and I gain 1. It's a lot of incremental little value. I had a game where I grinded out like 10 life swing from every player with this card. It's sneaky good. And it's also more exciting than just a medallion, so that's also why I like it. Some ramp, Lightning Greaves. Not much ramp, actually, in this deck. This deck, I actually don't feel like it needs to ramp that much because so many zombies are pretty cheap and just have so much early value anyway. It's just such a... This is like a creature-based machine, almost. Let's look at some enchantments that are insanely good. Black Market, this card is busted. If you go around the table even once, or a board wipe happens, this card, like... Whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on it. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add a black mana for each charge counter on it. Hey, look, I'm a zombie deck. I'm going to play Black Market, sacrifice 5 of my own creatures, have 5 counters on it. Let's say 2 or 3 things die. Oh, I get 8 mana next turn. And that only goes up. This is one of those sneaky, everyone must kill it cards. Like, there's a lot of cards that are good. So here's how to threat assess an EDH in my mind. If a card does one of 2 things, you need to try to remove it. If a card is going to help the other person win the game extremely quickly and get insane value for their mana out of it, or if you are going to be incredibly negatively hurt by an opposing card, those are how you choose what your primary targets are. Black Market is one of those cards that it's not one of those cards you have to remove immediately. It's one of those cards that as soon as you see it gaining value, because in a situation where no one's playing creature decks, the Black Market might not do much. Usually, though, the person playing it has ways to build it up themselves and make your opponents help you build it up by like board wiping or something. If you see any kind of value start to build up on a Black Market, you need to throw removal at it. You just have to. It's essential to kill. Call to the Grave. This card I used to think sucked, and it sneaky won me a game. The last 2 games I played with this deck, it actually won me the game by locking my opponents out of the game. Call to the Grave, 5 mana. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-zombie creature. My commander is sadly not a zombie, but in exchange, most of my creatures are. At the beginning of the each end step, if no creatures are on the battlefield, sacrifice Call to the Grave. If your opponents aren't also playing zombies, and you have any zombie that sticks around, this will never go away, and your opponents will be ground out of creatures. I was in a 3-player game 2 weeks ago. My opponents could not have after 3 go-arounds, my opponents did not have creatures that lasted on the board at all anymore, because every time it got around to their turn, sacrifice. Oh, I have zombies on the field, so what do I care? It's great. Some other good stuff. Dictative Airbolt's Grave Pack. Whenever your stuff dies, your opponent's dies. It's a great way to use your deaths to keep your opponents off the board. Leona's Mastery is good. Necromancer's Stockpile, I could probably cut it. It's one of those cards that's so fun and so thematic that I want it to work, but it just doesn't end up working that much. I don't know. I haven't run into a single situation where I was like, oh my god, this blew me away, so I need to keep it. Secrets of the Dead is the card, though, that I will never get rid of. Whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard, like your commander's ability, draw a card. Anything that adds draw card to something is great value, usually. Rooftop Storm is the single most busted zombie tribal card ever printed. You may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for zombie creature spells you cast. As we saw with Omnipotence, or Omniscience, free things are good. So, making all your zombies free is really good. It also interacts with your commander. It makes one zombie in your graveyard free every turn with your commander. It's good. Then we have just some blue instants that are fun. Tragic Slip is hilarious because you can trigger Morbid almost all the time. So giving a creature minus 13/13 kills almost anything in the format and gets run indestructible again. So for 1 mana, that's pretty good. In black, too, so it's not like a Swords to Plowshares or Path to Exile. Fact or Fiction is always good in a blue deck, especially good in a deck where you don't mind if things go to your graveyard. So the thing about Fact or Fiction is it's always good. Any deck that runs blue probably can run Fact or Fiction. Looking at 5 cards and getting at least one of the best card out of those 5 for you is good, if not 2 or 3 good cards for you. However, the real trick is if you have a graveyard deck, like a zombie deck, you don't care what cards go into your graveyard or in your hand, so it's just look at these 5 good cards. Which ones do you want, and which ones can you use later from your graveyard? It's just insane value. Cyclonic Rift. Compelling Deterrence is just fun for bouncing and then making someone discard it. It's late game, it can actually be removal if you have a zombie to just kill a permanent, but early game, it's like bouncing things, slow a guy down and make a discard. So it's all good value. The sorceries are awesome. Zombie Apocalypse is thematic as hell and sometimes helps. I've had it not help much sometimes. Victimize is busted. Getting 2 things out of your graveyard for like a zombie token is just such busted, insane good value. It's stupid. Not gonna lie, it's stupid. Dread Summons can be sneaky good. Everyone milling usually means it's good for me. The only thing that sucks is in a situation where an opponent is running a graveyard deck, that's a problem. Dread Return's busted. Dark Salvation can be removal for 1 black mana again. Damnation, the board wipe that keeps on giving. The board wipe that was a meme in the Magic community for a long time. Buried Alive, your graveyard is a resource. Sending things straight to your graveyard is no problem for me. Army of the Damned, busted. 2 Lilianas, the 2 Lilianas that focus on zombies. I recently had a game where I felt so bad. I was that same 3-player game where I locked my opponents out with Cult to the Grave. I had all 3 Lilianas in this deck. I know you only see 2. There's 1 as a creature. I had all 3 Lilianas on the field at the time, and I ultimated Liliana the Last Hope, so I was getting zombies every turn. It was stupid. It was stupid value. They scooped up pretty soon after I had all 3 Lilianas. It was insane, but they're both insanely good cards on their own, but with zombies, they're insane. You know a Planeswalker is good for your deck when every single ability they have is helpful. Like, a Planeswalker can be considered for your EDH deck if it fits the color theme and has at least 2 abilities that synergize well with your deck or are just good enough overall that they work. The really good Planeswalkers have every ability be good with your deck. This Liliana of the Last Hope, removal, milling things and getting creatures from your graveyard, that's all good. Getting an emblem, which is a super Endless Ranks of the Dead, which is actually a card that I cut from the deck recently. It didn't do what I needed it to. Or Liliana's Death's Majesty. Get a zombie, mill. Great. Return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Always. Make it a zombie even. If I could send my commander to the graveyard, I could get around Call to the Grave. Destroy all non-zombies. All good things. Like, it's insane. Then we get into the creatures. You'll notice there's a lot. A lot more even than the last 2 decks. These are all the creatures. Let's see. How many is this? If I take these 2 and put them down here, it's just 4 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 36 creatures. That's over a third of the deck is just creature cards. There's a reason. And also, how many aren't zombies? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of the 30. How many did I say? 36? A sixth of the creatures aren't zombies. The zombies are all really good. There's so much value in this fucking deck. I just love it. And everything that's not a zombie, synergize it with zombies. Ghoul Color Gisa, chop apart a zombie, make more zombies. Grave Titan, make zombies. Liliana Heretical Healer, she flips over into Liliana Defiant Necromancer, who is an even better version of Liliana the Veil, one of the strongest modern cards ever printed. And also when she flips over, whenever another non-token creature you control dies, exile her, she transforms, and you get a zombie along for the ride. It's just so much zombie value. It's great. Newscraft Mob, Macias, Merciless Executioner, is not a zombie, I apologize. But he's a non-zombie version of Fleshbag Marauder, who's already a good card and worth having in the deck because you can recur creatures. I'm not going to go over every zombie. All of these zombies are insane. Like, actually, Shieldred also, so 8. Shit. They all synergize with zombies still. Shut up. Scarab God is one of the most fun cards ever and is busted and is expensive because of standard. Thank God I got it before it got too expensive. This deck is one of the ones that it's... So, maybe at the end of the next episode, I'll total up my decks and kind of talk about where they stack up in terms of a tier list. But as far as decks that will not change much, this one. Thinking about all my decks, a bunch of them will probably change at least a few cards almost every set. They have to print some real good zombies for me to be willing to cut cards from this deck. Looking around at what possible cuts are, what things I've been kind of unhappy with. Undead Alchemist always feels hit or miss to me. I don't love milling people, but you do get so many fucking zombies from him when you get the right situation. But I just feel like there's so many other more interesting things to do. Merciless Executioner is good, and you can recur him, but he's not a zombie, so it doesn't synergize quite as well. Lord of the Accursed, I don't love. Forgotten Creation, he can be very hit or miss. Like, very hit or miss, I've found. Honestly, that's... I don't know how much else. Dread Summons is like a maybe... Although I did win a game off that a while ago. I remember that now, actually. Yeah. Necromancer Stockpile, like I said. Zombie Apocalypse can kind of be goofy, but sometimes late game is insane value. So, there's definitely things that I could cut, but honestly, none of the cards I listed are super bad in the deck. They're ones that I just don't love as much as other cards in the deck are. But I love this deck. This is one of my most fun decks to pull out. Like, I honestly, like I've said, I love all of my decks. Looking at this list on top, I love all of these. They're all amazing. But this is one of the just most solid ones. This isn't one of the ones that's going to win every game. That's the other thing. Depala, in terms of power level, is probably near the bottom. Breya is middle, but is more guaranteed to go off, but it's harder to go off. Like, Breya is one of the most thought-provoking decks I have. There's so many lines of play with what do you sacrifice, what do you blah, 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 blah. Triggers. There's so many triggers going on. It's incredible. Arjun is just lower middle of the pack, but still can just grind out and win. In terms of, like, middle of the pack, solid, good power, like, let's see. See, you know what's funny? All 4 of the decks I'm going to talk about in next episode are probably my top 4 power decks. So if we go by that thought process, then Gisa and Geralf and Breya are on top, and then Arjun and Depala are at the bottom. I don't know how I'd be able to even rank all of them beyond that, but this deck just feels good to play. Like, I could probably work on the mana base, make it a little more consistent, and kind of tighten it up a little bit. I feel like I kind of made it loose when I built it as Grimgrin originally, and it could use a few upgrades, changes maybe. But overall, fucking love this deck. Zombies are such a fun tribe, and it's by far the most grindy, fun, value-y tribe. Oh, man, even Kakusho isn't... Fuck, I screwed up my count on what's zombie and what's not so bad it's embarrassing. Goodness gracious me, I apologize. Everything works with zombies or the graveyard theme, okay? God, come on. Anyway, guys, wow, I've been talking for a long time about my commander decks, and as you can see, it's 12:15. I should go to bed. Thank you all so much for watching. I know that this isn't a series that's going to get lots of views, and if you stuck around through this length of the episode, thank you so much. The point of this video is to share my absolute love of the Commander format. how much fun it is every Saturday when I get to go to my store for about 6 hours and just play Commander. It's it's legitimately one of the highlights of my week. And I've made friends with some people at the store. It's just a blast to do. And I feel like it's like one of the most mental workouts I get is trying to play these Commander decks that I've built, and I just love them so much. There's so much care and attention I've tried to put into all of them. And I wanted the chance to share that with some of my YouTube audience. So thank you all so much if you've stuck around this long. I truly appreciate it. And I know at least one person, I know I saw Cypher left a comment recently where he's like, oh, maybe I would, Matt, you guys talk about Magic so much, it sounds kind of cool. Like even if I don't get anyone into Magic, I always like to talk about it, and I love to have the chance to have a way to show what I play and what I love. So thank you all so much for watching. Command me. For next time, we'll cover my other 4 Commander decks, and then we'll move on to whenever a set comes out, or whenever I decide to make a big sweeping set of design changes. I'll talk about it because I want to have this record as well. So thank you all so much. My name is Timpedia, and I will catch you guys later.